what I think they should have done is recast Daredevil to someone who could do an equally good job. I worry about you, Zach. I worry about you, Zach.
Why do you worry about me?
Because I think sometimes you fall into the nostalgia bait.
Bringing back Charlie Cox is different than bringing back Hugh Jackman.
Why?
We're going to start there from the beginning.
Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
World! I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
Welcome everybody to the One Eyed Film Podcast. I'm your host Seth Mossberg, and we got Zach back. Zach Attack back.
Hey.
He's been absent for a little bit, but we're going to come back with a banger. We got a good one today, talking about Daredevil specifically.
Wait, I thought we were talking about She-Hulk.
Oh.
Dang it.
Same thing, right? Like he appears in both.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, we might talk about She-Hulk, but not today. Zach has been absent since May, and that's not because he's been shunned or anything. We just haven't had an episode for him. But here we go. One that we're both really passionate about. I don't even remember how I think I just wanted to watch Daredevil because it was an MCU show that wasn't canon or something, so it just intriguing to me. But there's a lot more to it when I started watching it. There's a whole religious side of it that actually is pretty accurate and worth talking about. There's a whole moral dilemma, especially in season 2, about vigilantes and the whole even superhero persona and genre, basically. So we'll hit all of that. There's just some deep intellectual stuff in this show that I feel like is often slept on for when compared to the majority of the MCU. And it kind of got popularized a little bit when the whole Netflix deal ran out and Disney Plus got it back. So some people were like, oh, I guess I can watch it now all on one subscription. But yeah, if you had to sum up your thoughts, to give an overview of the next hour, what would you say about Daredevil, the entirety of the show? And if anyone's confused, we're not talking about the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie. We're talking man, I really didn't communicate what we were talking about. Daredevil, what I meant by that. It's not She-Hulk. It's not Ben Affleck. It's Charlie Cox and the Netflix TV show. Yeah, what do you have to say for yourself?
It's very deep, complex, theological, and yeah, I mean, if I were just to say it in 3 words, that would be a good 3 words, I would say. And just kind of like one man against the world in a very Batman type of way. I mean, they get compared a lot. I was going to say that. There are similar characters. I mean, there's a lot of differences between the two, but Hell's Kitchen is very Gotham-esque. Mm-hmm. In the sense where it's like everyone's corrupt and there's like 5 good people.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are probably going to die. Yeah.
For that emotional scene, the mentor dies and then you get spurred on to do something. No, I actually, as I was watching through season 3 to get caught up for this episode, which I did in a day, I was like, crap, I got to finish it. No, I was actually watching on and off again the Dark Knight trilogy and realizing that there's a lot of comparisons made between Daredevil and Batman with the whole I'll never kill rule, with the morality of being a vigilante and then living a double life. Will the law actually prosecute properly? In Daredevil's hands, is like he's actually a defense attorney, so he's, especially in season 2, you see a lot of legal action as a lawyer where he's defending the very guy he's technically fighting, back and forth, like between his 2 personas. And touch really quickly on She-Hulk. That's what I was hoping for the She-Hulk story, was 2 lawyers who were superheroes in their off time, seeing things differently in the courtroom and then acting it out as superheroes completely under the radar. That's what I was hoping for. I think it could have worked, but it didn't, and it didn't even go that route. So I don't know. That's how I would have pitched it.
I think She-Hulk could have still been a comedy. I mean, a legal comedy is what they were going for, but they couldn't write a courtroom scene or comedy, in my opinion. So it just fell flat in both ways.
We'll talk about She-Hulk another time. We got to talk about Daredevil. How about it?
It's good.
It's good. Why is it good? Why is Daredevil good, an entertaining watch? Why is it intriguing? Why are we doing this episode? Like, why aren't we doing this on Jessica Jones? Why aren't we doing it on She-Hulk? Why are we doing it on Daredevil?
Because Daredevil gets it right. it's like, this is such a complicated question you've given me. I mean, it's kind of already mostly what I already said earlier. It's just kind of the theology behind it and the moral dilemmas and implications of just this guy going out to fight crime and make his city a better place. And also, one of the themes I find most interesting is just kind of like your past or your circumstances don't define you. And, you know, like with Matt Murdock being blind for one thing, but then you see like his past and his parents too and everything and how that went down. And despite all of that, he's still able to be like a positive influence and be a hero to the world around him.
I think what makes it so interesting is the theology. For me, others may say that it's interesting because it's an offshoot of the MCU where they reference certain things about New York that happened in Avengers and stuff like that. I think it only really does that in the first season.
It was just like once too.
Yeah, it's not that much. Like it could be a standalone. But why it's interesting to me is the theology and how it gets a lot of stuff right. Like for being based in Catholic denomination, like that's where the theology comes from, is Matt was raised in a Catholic orphanage, and his conversations with Father Lantom, even from the first episode, talking about how like he's in confessional and he's saying, forgive me for something I'm going to do, because he's made up his mind that he's gonna cause problems, but he knows it's wrong. But then that kind of kicks off his entire arc of violence and how he won't kill because that's not his place to judge. And so it also, here's the other thing, I think it shows human depravity really well. The holy characters, the biblical, the Christian characters are sinners. It shows it really well. It shows that Father Lantom didn't do everything right, even if he was a Catholic priest, and how Maggie was a absent mother for Matthew. And just, even though they are the holy ones, the nun and the priest, they're still sinners. And I think that was good to show that they weren't always casting blame. They weren't the classic movie Christian that are preaching on the street corners, being the hateful ones, and then never seeing the log in their own eye. Like, these people saw their flaws and understood that they were sinners just as much as Matt is. And they worked through that in this story. Like, there's forgiveness, there's redemption, especially in season 3 when the big reveal about Maggie and Matt comes to terms with that. It seems closer to the end of the finale that he's forgiving. And on top of this, I want to give you a second here to talk. On top of this, it's a well-written story. And maybe this was a product of around the 2010 era where it wasn't a thing to really insert political correctness and things like that into a story when it wasn't necessary. Like, it's just good writing. It's not leaning either side, really. It's telling a story well. And I think that's why I enjoyed it now these days, because there's so much, I mean, there's always been garbage in Hollywood, but when I say objective garbage to anyone, where there's people on the left and the right saying this was just poorly written, understanding the story and how it develops over multiple episodes. Each episode, if you compare the story structure of Daredevil to any of the Marvel shows, it's very different. Yes, they try and include a fight scene. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small, and often it's just drama. Like, that's kind of how the legal thing worked. The whole legal shtick of Daredevil worked, is just there was enough drama to make the stakes high enough. People stayed dead, for goodness sake. That had an effect. You see, this is one thing that Daredevil and probably just the Netflix series does well, probably because it's Netflix, honestly, the physical damage from fights that you don't see in a PG-13 Marvel movie. Like, it's intense for sure at some points, but you see that even though Matt crawls back to his hotel and he gets bandaged up, he's still hurting in the next fight. Like, he may be recovering faster than a normal human might, whatever. He's being affected. He's getting knocked out for days sometimes by these fights with super silent ninjas. That's where you got to suspend your disbelief a little bit. But yeah, it's one of those that you're not trying to find out the plot holes, because you're just enjoying it at least the first time. Maybe, I don't know how many times have you watched it? Like, did you?
I've seen it twice all the way through.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So like Daredevil is probably like my second favorite show of all time. And one of the big reasons for that is just like how complex the characters are. Like we were already saying with the holy people, they show bad and evil side to them sometimes. But then you got a character like Kingpin, who you expect to just be like completely evil, but you feel bad for him sometimes. And you kind of like, you want him to be with Vanessa. Though everything is separating them, you still like want them to end up with each other at the end in some ways. And that just kind of helps you to further connect with him as a character in a way where even though you know what he's doing is wrong, you still really understand why he's doing it. Very similar to Matt. He wants to save New York. Matt wants to do that through justice, as a lawyer and as a vigilante, but Kingpin wants to do that through control and through like whatever means necessary. Whoever he's got to kill, he wants to control Hell's Kitchen to save it. And we feel for him in that and in his relationship with Vanessa. And that's just, he's one of the best villains I think we've at least seen in the MCU. And that's just because they humanized him so much that we could feel with him at such a personal level.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Kingpin for a sec, because he is probably one of the most interesting characters. I saw a video recently about humanizing villains or sympathizing villains, one of the two, and how things as recent as Peter Pan and Wendy, where they made Peter Pan the bad guy because they made a sympathetic backstory for Hook and made you feel bad for him because Peter Pan cast him out of the Lost Boys after Hook decided that he didn't want to be a child for his whole life. Now that kind of makes sense, but that's not the point of the story. Hook is the bad guy. If you watch the original fairy tale, yes, he's just supposed to be evil incarnate and doesn't need a reason. And the best villains have a reason. And so that's where Kingpin comes to the front of he's sympathetic and he has a reason. And yet he's still objectively wrong. Yeah. He's on the wrong side of the law, even though you almost sometimes want to root for him because of his love for Vanessa or because of his reasons for what he wants. And he's just driven in a different way to a different result that makes you understand. It's a Thanos situation, but even on a more personal level.
Yeah.
We're eventually going to do an episode on Infinity War and Endgame and try and answer the question, was Thanos right? Like, that's one of the biggest conversations to come out of that movie is they wrote it in such a way that made you think like his motives were right. His means were wrong. And that's the same with Kingpin, and giving him the story that I think really, it did humanize him. Like, it made him into a possible real person without being the circle-shaped guy with no neck from the comics. But I guess you could also compare it to something like Into the Spider-Verse, where that version of Kingpin it still had a lot of sympathy, where he was trying to bring back his family, but it was still a lot of just, I'm mean because I'm mean. And that worked for that movie, I think. But yeah, it's almost fell prey to bringing back a character that didn't need to be, but I would actually say he was a good season 3 villain as well as a season 1 villain, and even part of season 2. Like, it's all connected, and it makes it feel less of we're out of ideas. Let's bring back a character we put in jail a long time ago, and instead just a massive continuation of the story. Like, where each of the Disney shows, both Marvel, Star Wars, whatever, feel episodic. Like, each episode is a 20, 30, 40-minute movie where it has to fit 3 acts in there. This instead feels like a 13, 14, 15-hour movie chopped into 40 to 50-minute episode. Yeah. It's all, and even bigger. Like, my point is that the entire series feels complete. It probably has plot holes, but it feels as it's one big cohesive story from season 1, episode 1 to season 3, episode 13.
One of the biggest issues with most of the MCU shows is just, I think they don't have enough episodes, and that leads to kind of a rushed story in the end, where you kind of have like 5 episodes of setup and then just kind of the final episode of your finale, and you're crunched into one 40-minute episode, and it's just way too much to be happening in one episode. I think we saw that with like WandaVision and Moon Knight and Falcon and Winter Soldier probably too. It's just, they leave too much for one episode, and that's kind of like the main issue with most of the MCU shows. But with this one, you've got 13 episodes per season, and instead of like half an hour, each one's like at least 50 minutes long. So they fill that time well too. It hardly ever drags. It's just kind of like a one, as you said, cohesive story, and you understand what's going on from point to point to point, and it never feels like it's going too slow or too fast. You're just like in the moment, and they're really just bringing you along really well.
Let's talk about some of the characters, really complex characters, I would say. I mean, we already talked a bit about Wilson Fisk and how he's a businessman, he's a lover, he wants what he wants and he gets it, no matter how many people he has to go through. How he plays with people's minds. That was something that was, I don't know, he kind of lords over people and always being one step ahead. He's a classic, well-written villain. Let's talk about Matt Murdock, the title character, and really how he's come to terms with himself, his whole internal struggle of being a vigilante, and how he can justly bring these people to justice. Like, even as a lawyer, he sometimes sees that the law is not good, and that's because of Fisk, because of the corruption that Fisk can buy off a guard or buy off some officers. Like, he wants to cross the line but not push the limit, where he understands that, or in his mind, vigilanteism and being Daredevil gives him the opportunity to cause fear in some cases, to get information he couldn't have otherwise, to deliver bad guys to officers, sometimes kind of a Batman move there. But especially in season 2, he develops his no killing rule a lot like Batman. And that's his conversation with the Punisher, Frank Castle, who has the same mentality but executes it differently. Literally, he decides that these people are bad and it's his job to take them out of the picture without the law in the way. And Matt goes to the same lengths to a point, and then he stops. He wants to teach that person a lesson without the law by skipping that law step and only not killing them, whereas Frank Castle takes that extra step because he's not fazed by it as a soldier. And I think that was there were multiple. Okay, the way you can tell it is a genius show is when you are looking forward to the two sides, the protagonist and the antagonist, talking about it instead of fighting about it.
Yep.
Like, often the fight scenes got to be a lot for me. It's fight scenes. It's well choreographed to the point of a TV show. I often skip them because I was more interested in the intellectual part of the fights, the debates between the two sides. The one where Castle had Daredevil tied up in chains on the roof. The one where Castle was in the graveyard and they were like, he was beat and Matt was just sitting there talking to him about his kids, to the one on the boat right before it blew up. Like, all those conversations is just actually Castle pushing Matt to the same point that he is. And Frank says things like, "You're just so much like me." And that's like, I feel like that's sometimes a cliche for certain villains of like, "You're just like me." And that's actually probably where some of the best villains come from. Even though it's cliche, you see the similarities. You're just not willing to take the step that I will. And that step is a moral step of crossing the law that's written on everyone's hearts of mostly do not murder in most villains situations, but it's written on everyone's heart. And just in these antagonists' view, that's not a standard for them. And so they won't cross that, or they cross that line without thinking about it. That's where Frank Castle is. He sees that people are doing things wrong, mostly morally wrong. And so he says, "All right, then you made your choice. You're done." Whereas Matt is like, "No, we're going to take them down as vigilantes and then turn them into the police where justice can be served." And the whole thing is about, is justice just? Is our justice in the American system just? Is God's justice just? And is that just to leave them for the rest of their life and let them be judged in heaven, like, or at the great throne of judgment? Like, that's a conversation that's had. It's so intellectual. I love it.
Yeah, that rooftop scene is probably like the second best scene in the show, I would say.
Yeah.
Just with their two philosophies clashing and just seeing them argue in that way. Kind of in a similar way to how Oppenheimer was really compelling, even though it was just a lot of talking. This is like one of the most compelling scenes in the show, as you were saying. One of the most interesting lines from their conversation is when Frank Castle says, "You're one bad day away from being me."
That's good writing.
Such a good line. And I think the thing is, it's like, Frank sees Matt fighting for the right motives, but he wants to see him go one step further. He's like, "You're doing the right thing, you're just doing it wrong." Yeah. And like, you have to be out there and killing these bad guys if you actually want to be making a difference. But Matt sees everyone with like a glimmer of hope. And that's what makes him like the hero of this series, is that he sees the good in people. He sees something more in even the worst of people. And that's why he doesn't kill.
He doesn't kill, but he definitely punches them into the face and makes them go unconscious for who knows how many hours, causing brain damage and a lot of hurt. No, that's the Faceless Army type of
and
fight
a lot of
scenes
hospital bills.
That's something you got to deal with in superhero movies. But like I said, this whole series feels like a consistent arc because then the finale of the entire series has been building with Matt wanting, he's been saying, I'm just going to kill Kingpin. I'm going to kill Fisk. It's over. Like, I've had enough of this. I'm going to do it. And that's what makes Foggy and Karen so worried for their friend. And then he gets to that point and he has his hands around Fisk's head ready to snap his neck, and he can't do it. He knows his limit, and that scream is, oh boy, that was gold. I think Charlie Cox, both in his action, like he does a lot of his stunts, and he also does the whole blind thing well, of his distant look and being able to convincingly play a blind man. His performance, especially in that scene, just shows his passion and sees the internal struggle that Matt Murdock is experiencing. He knows that what Frank Castle said has truth to it. And he knows that it's just going to be a repeat of season 1 where he puts him back in prison and then he gets out and he gains control again. But he's willing to follow the law to that point of turning him in instead of ending his life, knowing that that he becomes worse. He becomes just like Castle if he takes that step.
That's the best scene right there. The I beat you scene in Fisk's apartment is just golden.
I was going to say, you said the second best was the rooftop. I was like, what's the first?
Yeah.
It really made a difference. Me watching, I binged the whole season 3 in one day, and it made a difference seeing it in that context from start to finish. First off, it goes a lot faster than you think chronologically. It happens within a couple days from episode 1 to episode 13. It's also just shows it builds and then it just kind of immediately drops off. Even though there's still victory, there was also brokenness in Matt's character.
I don't think I've ever seen a scene culminate a whole show so well.
Oh, you don't think it was the just wait. It's gonna be good. The WandaVision scene where his name is revealed.
No, not the Ralph Boner scene.
Ralph Boner. You don't think it's the Ralph Boner scene from WandaVision?
No.
That's not the best, best end to a series.
I don't know if I've talked to you about this, but I hated the Ralph Boner twist so much. One of the worst twists in all of Marvel.
We'll save it.
I was about to get into it.
But no.
We'll save it.
Daredevil. Why is it the best culmination, the final scene or whatever?
Because it's the end of their conflict. I mean, now we know that Marvel's continuing it. It ends their conflict so well. Especially, with that season, he's dead set on killing Kingpin for, like, practically the whole season. But still, he holds back there. He says, I won't let you destroy who I am. He had, like, fallen into darkness so much that season. But still, like, I think mostly from, like, the commitment and the care of his friends, he's able to come back into light and have that moment there where even though Kingpin's done so much wrong to him and to his friends and to his city, he won't kill him just because of who he is.
I would say that's similar to the Christian life of following a path of sin and then realizing that Satan has this hold on you. And in that moment of realization saying, you're not going to take me in this moment. Like, I'm God's child. It wasn't that intense in the show, but it has the same air of wanting to not take that step into darkness and to come back into goodness and truth and be redeemed, basically.
I want to get a little bit, I mean, we're kind of already talking about it, but kind of like the psychology of Daredevil in Matt's head, I think is the best way to put it.
Sure.
I kind of we even see Matt refer to Daredevil as the devil. He says, like, let the devil out at one point. And I think Daredevil, in a sense, is the beast, and Matt is the one holding the reins.
Yeah. That's a very Batman take in the sense of Bruce Wayne is his mask, and Batman is who he is.
But if it was, like, just Daredevil, he would be killing people. But since there's that Matt side of him, he'll still hold back. Like, for all of season 1, he believes, like, he's on God's mission here. In season 3, he talks about how he used to listen to people's prayers, and he kind of viewed that as his mission. And then that continues into and through season 1. And he's just doing this because he feels like it's what he's meant to do. He feels forced kind of into this gray in the sense that he knows what he's doing is wrong, but it would be worse if he did nothing. And then kind of as we continue into season 2, we see his philosophy challenged by Frank Castle and just like his kind of like, who is Daredevil meant to be? And then as we continue for the rest of season 2, no matter how like unfocused it felt, that's kind of my opinion on season 2. Season 2 gets really weird.
Yeah, I didn't really like the ninjas. Just throwing that out there. I didn't like the ninjas.
When we get to the episode where the ninjas are attacking the hospital with the zombie children, I'm like, what's going on? What happened to Daredevil?
It's not that those episodes get a little ungrounded. But I get what you're saying. He has a line. I forget which episode or part of the story. He says, "How do you know the angel and the devil inside me aren't the same thing?"
Another great line. And then, but for that rest of season 2, he's kind of forced and pulled in two directions, where Matt or Foggy and Karen need him as Matt, but Elektra needs him as Daredevil. And it reminds me a lot of the verse, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Well, in this sense, it's kind of like, I guess, a parable in a sense, with Foggy and Karen being the way that he should go and Elektra being this sinful way. And we see Elektra kind of enable him in a sense, and we see, she wants Daredevil without Matt. She wants the Beast, and she wants him to I guess near the end she sees that he's doing good without killing people. But for most of the season, at least, we see her really enable him, because Daredevil is like his outlet, and how he just gets out all of his rage and past trauma and all that. So she's using that to use him in a sense and accomplish these missions that she needs to get done, while ignoring and I guess despising in a way Karen and Foggy. And
he has a line, especially you see this in season 3, he says, "I'm Daredevil, not even God can stop that now." He almost goes to the dark side. And that's what you see in the finale, is him just about to cross that line and realizing he wants to keep the reins. He wants to be Matt. He wants to still be human without being the monster.
In Daredevil, in the 3rd season, with Matt being dead, he kind of has full reign to live as Daredevil, and we see that leading to darkness and further considering killing people and killing Kingpin. And he only visits Foggy and Karen when he needs them for something, he steals Foggy's ID and gets information from him, but he never actually goes to them as friends during this time. And then we only really see him come back from that, as I said earlier, when he's got the love and care of his friends. And that's what draws him back to the light and brings Matt back to life, in a sense, is what I would say.
Yeah. Yep. Let's talk about the theology of the show really quick. I would say this is pretty close. This is the closest you would get to a Christian superhero show. Because even though it's Catholicism as the main religion, it's, I would say, conservative Catholicism, I suppose. It's got a lot of good perspectives on God, and maybe that's authentic Catholicism, but it honestly makes a lot of good points. And Matt understands how God, the relationship between God and man. He understands what sin is, and that standard is the most you could get in a respectable show without being Bible Man. Well, obviously Bible Man goes far into the cheesy Christian yet solid entertainment, and that's how you would do a actual Christian biblical superhero character. Catholicism is kind of the respectable religion. Even people will just say, "Oh, I'm Catholic." They might not be, whatever. It's respectable, and it's also widely known, at least the basis of it, the basis of God and Jesus and sin. And so that was how this show could thrive with the morality of it, is fighting against itself, fighting against the human nature versus what God wants from a redeemed soul. And that's one of the first lines you hear from Matt early on in the series, when he's in the confessional about, "I'm not asking for," what was it?
I'm not seeking penance for what I've done, Father. I'm asking forgiveness for what I'm about to do.
Yeah, forgiveness for what I'm about to do. It's that understanding that it's wrong, but still doing it. And we do that all the time.
Yeah.
How it's kind of a parable situation where you're like, "Oh, I would never do that." We do it all the time. Don't lie to yourself. We're all guilty of it, saying we're going to do one thing, or even knowing it's wrong and still doing it. And that's where they get the morality right. That's where they get the human depravity of, we are sinners. We are not good people. People ask, how can God let bad things happen to good people? It's he doesn't, because there are no good people. Your standard of good is very different from the standard of good. And that's nothing that we do is good. Our good deeds are like dirty rags to God. We understand that in the show, it acknowledges reality of we are sinners and we need to choose good instead of automatically doing good. And I think that just makes it so much more real. That's the authenticity of the show, more than just the writing, more than just the real characters who do things with a purpose. It's grounding it in what I believe is the truth, the capital T truth of human sin and redemption through Jesus.
Can we talk about Foggy for a little bit?
Yeah, as I was
I
talking about
love Foggy.
I was going through the characters. I was like, what do we have to say about Foggy or Karen? Go ahead with Foggy.
Foggy's great. When I watched it for the second time, I watched it with a couple friends, and we would always joke that it's the Foggy show.
The Foggy show.
Yes, that mostly started in season 2 when Matt's like just kind of being a jerk to his friends, and then Foggy's forced to stand up and everything.
Yeah.
So Foggy in season 1 is almost entirely dependent on Matt in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's the Nelson and Murdoch joint friendship.
Yeah, and I would say Matt probably pulls most of the weight in season 1 for Nelson and Murdoch. You know, because Matt's in it because he actually wants to see, like, innocent people go free. Foggy's mostly just in it for the money in season 1. He's even got a couple lines about that. And they kind of keep going on, you know, as best friends. You know, they want to see each other succeed, so they're doing this together. But then Foggy finds out Matt's secret, and he feels more than a little hurt. And this...
For good reason.
Yeah, it's very good reason. Yeah, very good reason. He's been hiding a lot from Foggy for a long time, which...
Especially that realization of college when knowing each other that long and realizing, oh, he heard that, he smelled that, I know he smelled that is weird, but that's honestly what Matt does. Is his intense senses, or understand. Oh, it was the heartbeat thing where Matt can tell if people are lying because their heartbeat quickens a little bit, and Foggy realizes he feels betrayed because he knew that Matt knew. He knew that Matt knew every single time Foggy lied.
Dude, that episode is so great. I think it's called...
kind of hard to watch because it's
Nelson versus Murdoch,
feelings.
I think is what it was called.
Oh, yeah. That's a great title.
Yeah. Because, you know, it's going through how they met and everything, and it switches back and forth between that and the two of them having this argument at the same time. And it's just, wow, such great storytelling. But yeah, this causes that argument there causes a strain in their relationship that kind of lasts for the rest of the show. And then in season 2, you know, Foggy already feels betrayed by Matt. And then he sees again and again that Matt's just not reliable as a partner anymore either in the law firm. So he learns to become more independent. He really becomes his own man instead of just being Matt's best friend. And then in season 3, he really starts to like... You know, he's in this for more than the money now. He's actually, like, acting because he wants to do good in the world. We see him run for district attorney and really, like, pull his neck out and really just risk his life for the greater good, which we would have never seen him do in the first season. But now he boldly stands up for what is right, even though it might mean risking his life.
Yeah, he has his arc of...
Yeah.
Thinking that lawyers make a lot of money, and because he's good at arguing that he would make a good lawyer. That's kind of the joke with some friends who are like, oh, you're good at arguing, oh, you like to talk, you'd be a good lawyer. But then he gets a heart, and he realizes that he's Matt without Daredevil, and that's why they work so well together, is that he believes in the law, believes in justice, and will go to the lengths of the law within the confines of justice to bring the bad guys down legally. And he's just he's quirky and he's fun to watch, and he grows is the gist of it. And that's, I know it's weird, but it kind of shows in his hair. Like when he had it down, he was chill, he was laid back, he was having fun, and then he got all serious and cut it and made him look more professional and stuff like that. Now, we haven't talked about Karen yet. I thought about this as I was finishing up the season. Is she, without the standard of Christ and the perfect Proverbs 31 woman, is she a strong woman? Is she a good, strong, independent woman?
Is she like a well-written woman instead of a Mary Sue?
That's obvious. I think that's very obvious that she's well-written and she's not a Mary Sue like a lot of female characters today. But she's both intense and sensitive.
Yeah.
She's intense when she needs to be. She will shoot people when her life depends on it. That was a tough scene with Wesley, and it comes back to haunt her in season 3, but she starts carrying a gun. Like, she realizes that she needs to protect herself in those ways. Like, in that way, she's strong, and yet she's still sensitive, and needs like anyone should be. Like, you're not without your flaws, and she has her flaws of not really liking the gore sometimes, or like understanding that the weight of humanness, whereas often the guys are going around punching or killing other people, but she's so taken aback by Wesley's murder.
I mean, basically, like every character in this show, she is well written and complex.
Yeah.
And, you know, after being she gets abandoned by her family and then moves to Hell's Kitchen. And then she gets framed for murder from the job she's in. Mm-hmm. So then Karen really is a home in Matt and Foggy in a lot of ways because she's got nothing left. And then when the rift forms between Matt and Foggy, she kind of like doesn't know where to go for a while. And then she finds journalism and she finds the New York Bulletin. Yeah, the New York Bulletin. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
And she really just commits herself to finding the truth and being bold enough to speak the truth, even if it means risking her life, even if it means putting herself in a dangerous situation, even though if it means like breaking a relationship with someone. It's just like she fully commits herself to speaking the truth and making sure everyone knows it.
Yeah, she's very blunt in what she says. Yeah. And that often is lacking in love, but she does it out of truth, like knowing that Matt needs to hear this or something like that. Like, and that's kind of where she helped out in the court cases where Matt and Foggy needed to be lawyers, and then she would outburst with something. It was the right thing, but it wasn't always professional, but it needed to be said. Like, she's willing to say the tough stuff. Yeah.
I found it kind of funny in season 3. You know, she goes to threaten Kingpin. Remember that scene?
Yeah.
And then after that, I think she calls Matt, and she's like, Matt, I messed up. I think I went a step too far.
I mean, yeah, she's hot-headed, and she kind of knows it. That's why she thought she could get into Fisk's head. Yeah. So complex characters for sure. And because they're complex, you feel for them. Now, there's some side characters that don't follow that rule. Like, I honestly didn't feel much when Father Lanton died. Like, okay. I think I might have seen it coming, but he's the mentor, and it didn't make the same emotion as most mentor. Because in the classic hero's journey, the mentor dies or leaves, and the protagonist is meant to continue on. That's the modern version of, and it's not even modern, is Obi-Wan dying in A New Hope, or not even dying, but not there to help Luke anymore. And that's the hero's journey of it. And that's not, even though Father Lanton was a mentor, he wasn't that type of mentor. Same deal with Dex in season 3. He's an antagonist, but he's not the antagonist. Like, I believe he injures his back, his spine or something, and he's kind of that third party in the final fight, but then you just almost forget about him. He's there, yet he has a place. His inclusion as a fake Daredevil is a great addition. I watched it and I was like, oh boy, that's epic. But it's not the same as Frank Castle or Wilson Fisk. It's a different type of antagonist. And that's not wrong. It's just an observation I had to make. And that's probably how it falls prey to the TV show style, where it needs to fill the void with story somehow. And so it makes secondary and even tertiary characters that don't really have a main effect in the story except to pad the runtime a little bit.
You thought Poindexter was just padding the runtime? He was so good!
That's not completely what I said. I still stand by what I said, though. He had a very specific role, but it wasn't the main villain. I think that's obvious. It's still Fisk, and it was still the inner conflict of Matt. That's the main conflict of the series. And Dex was kind of just a initiator of those things. It also played into the concept of what does Daredevil mean to Matt. Yeah. Like, Daredevil is a symbol a lot like Batman. Again, back to the Batman comparisons. Like, now that he's using guns and killing people, what message does that make? And they even kind of talked about that in the Dark Knight of copycats. And you say you wanted Batman, you wanted Daredevil to be a symbol. Okay, and now people are adopting the symbol. Why is that bad? Now you can be the only one with the moral code. And I think we should talk about this more when it comes to Batman, because it's really personified in that character. I just think that the Marvel Netflix team took the Batman character and translated it well into this Daredevil interpretation.
Poindexter is a really great character. I think he was very well written in the sense that he's like this dark reflection of Matt. You know, he had a similar background to Matt, where his parents kind of both abandoned him in different ways. And then, you know, Matt kind of found faith. Poindexter never found that. And that's kind of what led them in two different directions. You know, I forgot who said it, but, you know, the difference between the hero and the villain is that the hero says, when I got hurt and I don't want anyone else to feel like I did. And the villain says, I got hurt, now I'm going to hurt others. And I think that's really what we see between Matt and Poindexter. Poindexter, you know, he's insane. He needs that North Star to guide him. he finds that first in his therapist, and his therapist passes away, and then he finds the routine and structure of the FBI, and then he loses that too, and then that's when Kingpin comes in, and Poindexter becomes like Kingpin's perfect pawn, because Kingpin somehow gets Poindexter's files. So then Kingpin is able to use that to sympathize and manipulate Poindexter into becoming this agent of chaos and just ruining the Daredevil name and going out and doing Kingpin's mission no matter like who he's got to go kill. And that's really where, while Matt has his own sense of justice that he got from his faith and his friends, Poindexter had none of that. He didn't have the faith, and he didn't really have the friends who were able to like commit and care for him the same way that Matt had Matt and Foggy.
Yeah, I would maybe argue where Foggy was all of Matt without Daredevil. Would you say that Dex was all of Daredevil without Matt?
I would say that.
Again, I think that's where the character of Matt Murdock excels, is being torn into between these two personalities. And that's any superhero who does an alter ego thing of being two people, like living a double life, and how that is very difficult, close to impossible. Just want to touch quickly, as grounded as the show is, there are some things that took me out of it. It's fiction, of course, but they really wanted to make it grounded. There's a lot of things. I mean, that's the point, is to, even though it's set in the Marvel universe with the attack on New York from Avengers, it's still supposed to be very down to earth. The super secret undead ninjas and the accuracy of Dex ricocheting bullets. Sorry, mini rant.
I guess that, yeah.
That's and I guess the protagonist's powers. That's the whole reason the show exists, I suppose. But yeah, it's suspending your disbelief. But specifically the first two kind of took me out of it, of ricocheting bullets and undead ninjas. Take it or leave it. It was good.
Yeah.
It had its place.
He's meant to be Hawkeye, kind of. I think.
He's actually, I think he's supposed to be a supervillain similar to Deadshot or something like that. Bullseye is Benjamin Poindexter in the comics.
Yes.
And that's his whole, did you see like the circles around his pupil in the not post-credit scene?
Yes. And also in the flashback episode where it's like black and white, another really well done episode. His baseball cap has the logo on it too.
Oh, cool. Actually, do you know if he comes back because of the not post-credit scene from the season finale?
I mean, that's what season 4 of Daredevil is going to be. But I don't know if that's what
I didn't know that it was season 4. Let's talk about the future of Daredevil. Is Daredevil Born Again season 4 or a not reboot because it's the same actors?
So we're asking what is Daredevil Born Again?
Future of Daredevil. And actually the has come future. Let's go there first. The first time we saw Charlie Cox back in as Daredevil, I am torn because it was a good cameo.
That was a good cameo.
It makes sense in the story. New York, Spider-Man was accused of crimes, and therefore you need a defense attorney. Who else to call than someone who already has expertise in superhero legal battles and is canon now because of the purchase from Disney of the Netflix shows? It makes sense. But because they have made it Charlie Cox, they now cannot recast Daredevil into somebody who could have been just as good or better. Now, I know that is a very controversial statement from a stan of the show to a stan of the show, because Charlie Cox is amazing at that role. That was like a disappointed dad. It's like, continue on. I know you're wrong, but keep going.
Go on.
I don't like that they are keeping characters from past events and movies as the same actor, partly because of something we already talked about, and that's Quicksilver's cameo in WandaVision and how that led nowhere. That is similar to what I saw Daredevil in No Way Home as. Now, of course, he was still Daredevil, but now they brought him in and are stuck with something they didn't create. And yes, it was still Marvel. It was still the Marvel show, but it has so many discrepancies. Here's the tough part. They either have to take all of what the Netflix shows showed and take that as canon, or take none of it as canon. I don't think it's a wise decision to take some of it. That makes it even more confusing. If they took none of it, then you're like, you don't need to watch all of Daredevil season 1 through 3 in order to watch Daredevil Born Again. If it's all of it, then they just say, yes, you should watch these to get a good precursor to this character. But now it's like, you need to watch all of it and ignore some of it. and then they have to explain which ones they have to ignore. I think moving forward, they should make it canon and just say all of what happened in the Netflix shows is what we're working off of. What I think they should have done is recast Daredevil to someone who could do an equally good job. I worry about you, Zach. I worry about you, Zach.
Why do you worry about me?
Because I think sometimes you fall into the nostalgia bait. Explain yourself.
Bringing back Charlie Cox is different than bringing back Hugh Jackman.
Why?
I'm going to start there. From the beginning, it was meant to be a part of the same universe, no matter how disconnected it was. And he is like, all the fans love him as the character. You can't argue with that. I don't think anyone looked at no one looked at Charlie Cox and said, that's a bad Daredevil. Everyone loved him. And while I think it's more nostalgia baiting to bring back Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin than it is to bring back Charlie Cox as Daredevil. In the sense that, at the end of season 3 of Daredevil, they've got like a checkmate. Matt put Fisk in a checkmate, So it's like, that's the end. That should be the end of their story. It doesn't make sense to bring back Fisk very much.
I understand that. Absolutely. And that's kind of what you talked about earlier, is that from seasons 1 to 3 was a complete story arc. It ended their conflict, and bringing it back isn't helping anything. I totally agree.
I mean, I would say the show is a full arc for Kingpin more than it is for Matt, because I think Matt can continue on from there. And they plan to continue on even from the beginning.
Yes, because it makes money.
Season 4 was supposed to happen. And I think it's
from Netflix?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why they set up Poindexter.
Sure. Oh, yeah, for sure. You think where they left the character of Matt Murdock at the end of season 3 is in a place where he can come back as Daredevil, because he was kind of satisfied of putting that, like he stopped wearing the red suit because he knew that it was not good. The symbol had changed, the meaning of it. Do you think that, aside from what Disney is doing with it now, do you think that the character of Matt could easily come back into the role of Daredevil even after he has gone through all of this conflict internally about being Daredevil, and kind of put that to rest at the end of season 3?
I think he would continue. I just don't think he would look at everything that is still happening and stop fighting against it.
Okay. So then move into when we actually saw him as Daredevil.
Oh, yeah,
Let's talk about She-Hulk briefly, because I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about She-Hulk, believe me.
That was the best episode of She-Hulk, but the worst Daredevil that we've seen.
That makes so much sense. I hated that I watched, 6-7 episodes of She-Hulk just in case Matt Murdock showed up.
I thought he was going to play a much larger role than he did.
I think I said that earlier. I wished it was a legal battle in court between the two of them, and then a superhero battle between the two of them in the streets. And they baited us with marketing, to be fair. Yeah. We fell for it, of promising us Daredevil and not delivering him until episodes 7 or 8. I watched 2 months of She-Hulk to see Daredevil. I haven't let that plague me, believe me. No, it was also frustrating of how they took the shell of Daredevil and made him something that he's not.
And well, first, I won't lie. In She-Hulk, when he first walks into the courtroom as like Matt Murdock, I kind of got chills. It was a cool scene. Would have been way better if we didn't know about it, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If just they didn't market that, and then we just see him walk in.
That's something cool. That I think movies need to figure out a balance between showing their biggest moment and letting it be a surprise. I think about that with Spider-Man in Civil War. I think about that with even something as recent as Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Like, they marketed it off of the massive stunt they did, but then it really wasn't cool because you'd seen it a dozen times on TV. It was still cool, don't get me wrong. But things like that don't have the same impact because you're already expecting.
And I think what I was kind of hoping with a show like She-Hulk 2 is that they were going to kind of like dive into like legal cases based on stuff that we've seen in MCU.
Ooh, yeah.
Instead of just making up all this elf stuff. Yeah, there was an elf. Wasn't there an elf in one of them?
I think so.
There was something weird. Some Asgardian something. I'm like, this is so dumb. What am I watching?
It started to get very mutant very quickly, and it's technically the most mutants we've gotten from Marvel, from Disney Marvel, and it made no sense. Sorry, we're not here to talk about She-Hulk.
Okay. I'll just talk about it a little bit more then. But they could have talked about the Sokovia Accords, the Snap, Westview.
They did talk about the Sokovia Accords. They did talk about the Sokovia Accords. And they said they'd been repealed in something we didn't get to see. They just mentioned that it happened.
That could have been an intense court scene right there, but instead,
that's what I'm saying.
One line of dialogue. It's
that's
like
actually,
somehow Palpatine returned.
That's actually a good point that I've seen from a lot of video essays. It's like, man, that one line would have been an entirely interesting movie on its own, but yet you threw it away in a single line of dialogue. I would have much rather seen that movie than this one that I'm watching.
It's kind of like when Obi-Wan says Clone Wars and A New Hope, and then they actually did something with that. You know what I mean? It's like, let's do something more often.
Yeah. Show, don't tell.
Yeah, what else was I saying, though? Okay, Daredevil and She-Hulk.
Legal battles.
Disappointing. The ketchup and mustard suit didn't really work.
I hated it, man. It was supposed to be, again, that's comic book fan bait. Like, that's people saying, I got sick and tired of the red suit, even though it's Daredevil, who's supposed to be red. And so let's give him this one-off comic accurate suit.
Not everything adapts well from comic to screen, and I think some people need to realize that.
That was a whole She-Hulk series. I also don't like how the writing of Matt's character fell prey to the current MCU situation of quippy one-liners. Looking back at the Netflix series, any of the jokes or one-liners or quips have their place. Like, they fit well into dialogue. I remember watching Daredevil, like, not Matt's introduction, Daredevil's introduction to She-Hulk on that roof or on the top of the parking lot. It's so flat. He's mostly CGI is another thing. That was something that was disappointing, is that they didn't really let him do his stunts, except maybe jump from a pad onto the ground. It's a lot of modern MCU stuffed into the shell of Daredevil. But now looking forward, we have a lot of hopes, but I don't think they're going to be met. And I already feel like that is MCU dead, which is technically your last episode you were on. We can already talk about it more and how it's changed. This is where I come back to my thesis on why they should have just recast Daredevil. Because now it is unclear if Daredevil Born Again is season 4 or a not reboot. And I get that soft reboot is kind of a term that's being used now, but it's falling prey to the nostalgia bait of saying you liked this guy for 3 whole seasons of this show where he's playing the same character, and only because of that will you watch this show. If they had cast somebody else who I think would be a good pick, I might also want to watch it more for the fact that I would be interested in what he has to bring. I already know what Charlie Cox is going to bring to the character of Daredevil, as best as he can with the script that he's given. With such a distance between the two stories, I feel like they either have to go all or nothing. That's why I said about just accepting the entire Netflix show as canon and then keep rolling with that. Like, I would probably accept that, like an actual season 4. But at the same time, Marvel's writing is worse than AI right now. So sometimes that's the only hesitancy I have. What do you expect, or what are you hoping for in vain for Daredevil Born Again?
What am I hoping for, or what am I expecting? What's the question here?
If you had to direct or produce Daredevil Born Again, what would you do? And then what do you expect them to do?
I would pick up where season 3 left off and kind of have
it's a great answer.
Poindexter Unchained. Just kind of him be like insane, without his North Star, and just kind of go crazy, and Matt's got to stop him and everything. I don't really know how that would turn into a 13-episode series. I mean, you have to add some subplots, and I don't really know what to add there. But overall, I think that would be a great main story for the show. What I'm expecting.
But
there's this whole rumor that Kingpin's gonna be running for mayor and stuff like that. And with all the stuff that he's publicly done, that shouldn't be happening.
Well, in a soft reboot, you only have to take part of what the Netflix show showed.
They shouldn't do that though. I think I can understand the sense of a soft reboot in the term that it's the same characters that we know. They've been through everything that we know they've been through, but it's not directly picking up the story, if that makes sense. If She-Hulk is if she shows up in the show at all, I might gouge my eyes out. Just gonna say it now. Oof. If you call me after she shows up in the show, I'm gonna be as blind as Matt Murdock, because I'm gonna hate it so much.
Well, that might happen.
I hope not. I really don't think it will. I don't know. I kind of hope they saw how bad She-Hulk did, and they're like, maybe we should just pretend that didn't happen.
I want to hope that. I don't think it's going to happen. Really quick about Kingpin. He showed up in Hawkeye. I don't know. This is another one of this. They made him a clown. down.
And a joke.
I think it's another situation that for some reason the writers of Disney and Marvel think that it's cool to make the bad guy a mystery until like the 6th episode. They've done that with Ahsoka. They did that with Hawkeye. They did that with Loki. As much as Loki was above average for what we've been getting, that's what they did with that show. It's really frustrating when they think that tension is conflict, and it's not, especially with your seasons being 8 episodes long. And Kingpin, or Wilson Fisk, showing up in the second to last episode of Hawkeye. It was cool because of the initial nostalgia bait, and then you realize, oh wait, this really doesn't make sense. And then it's another one of those comic things of, it's a similar vein of the mustard suit of Daredevil, that Echo shooting Kingpin in the face is supposed to, like, it's shown to look final. He's talking to her, she's holding the gun to his forehead, and then you hear the gunshot. Any normal viewer would see that and say, oh, he's dead. That's for the comic fans to say, I'm actually you here for a second. That happens in the comics, and then because he's bigger, he's more than just a fat man. Like, apparently his heftiness is due to muscle, and that's how he can do like the Kingpin smash. Which great way to do that reference in the show season 2, when Matt comes to talk to him in the prison, and Fisk kind of loses it, and for one frame of him beating him up, you see him go and do the Kingpin smash.
There's a shot like that in season 1 too, isn't there? Where Kingpin's just like totally beating Matt up.
Probably, but season 1, I watched season 1 too long ago, and season 2 and 3 were more recent. But it's a comic book thing of, if you know the comics, you know that that's not the case. I feel like it shouldn't be completely divisive because of knowledge of your audience. It's split. The superhero audience is very split because there are those who have read comics, who know what it's being inspired by, and those who haven't and are just watching it for the movies. Those people are going to watch it and see he's dead, and then be very confused when he comes back, and then be like me complaining about characters coming back from the dead and how stupid it is. Whereas all the comic book characters are going to watch it and be like, oh, he's coming back. He got shot in the eye and it got patched up, and he just has to wear an eye patch or something like that. Like, it's a very niche way to end a story for a villain that wasn't even built up for most of the series.
They relied on hype and stuff so much with that, and it just ended up not being satisfying at all.
So why did it work for Daredevil and not Kingpin?
Daredevil, you mean in No Way Home what?
As in, why are you so much more excited to see... I don't know what my question is. I think you're playing both sides of the argument, where you're excited to see Daredevil and the character you know and love. Yes, admit that he got screwed over in She-Hulk, but then Kingpin was the wrong move in Hawkeye.
Well, mostly just how they structured the story is what I'm saying.
Okay.
It's like they didn't tease him until like the end of episode 5, and then the finale was the only episode he was actually in.
So that's just a story structure problem.
Yeah, they had so many... There were deleted scenes where he was in it. He was supposed to be in it way more.
Yeah.
Like, if all the deleted scenes were added to Hawkeye, it would have been a way better show. There were so many interesting deleted scenes for that.
I don't think I've seen those, so maybe I'm judging too quick.
There was a lot of like cool parallelism between Echo and Hawkeye's story that they were going to set up and things, but then they just kind of cut all of it. I mean, Hawkeye's still a fun watch, but it could have been better than it was.
I think we'll talk about the Marvel shows sometime. My opinion on Hawkeye is that it had potential. I would say if they leaned into 2 aspects of it, the PTSD of Clint, both from like as a character as well as losing Natasha. If they leaned into that a lot more, it would have been good. And if they had set up Kingpin earlier. But we can talk about that another time. I think Daredevil Born Again is an interesting title considering how much we've talked about theology. It is thematic for the character, yes, because he's being brought back after the Daredevil show was canceled by Netflix. So it's a meta reference. It's a theological reference. I highly doubt that they will get any theological conversation that's mildly accurate like we did in the Netflix show. I might watch it for that sake. I think it's going to be another letdown because of the trend of Disney, Marvel, and Disney in general not really caring about good stories, just getting eye candy out, shaking keys in front of a baby, hoping they're entertained and will pay them a couple extra months for their failing subscription service. Yeah, that's what I got.
I don't know if you saw, there was an article recently where one of the showrunners was accusing Disney because, so I don't know if you know about this, but with Disney Channel shows, you know how they like, some of them change their names halfway through?
Yeah, I heard.
Have you heard about any of this?
Yeah.
So like Sweet Life of Zach and Cody went to like Sweet Life on Deck. And when they did that, they could count it as a new show and put all the actors like back to their original pay rates or whatever. And this showrunner from Daredevil is saying that they're doing the same thing now with Daredevil Born Again and giving it its new title. Is that so they can just pay everyone less than they would have to if it was Daredevil season 4?
Gotcha. I wonder if that's even bigger. I wonder if that's bigger than just Daredevil and TV. Is that why we've lost the just John Wick 2? Like it was John Wick 2, and then it was John Wick Parabellum, and then it was John Wick 4, which was weird. Like some of those types of renamings. I wonder if that has something, or if I honestly like the lack of numbers because it gives a little bit of a second title to it. But I wonder if there's a second reason for that of not making it a direct sequel, even though it obviously is.
I would assume that movies like that are kind of a different case. But I think it's been proven with these Disney Channel shows.
Yeah, for sure, for the Disney Channel shows.
I don't know if this Daredevil showrunner had like any evidence for this, but it's interesting that he came out about this. So
yeah, I don't think things inside of Disney HQ are going too hot, especially with the strikes. And actually, breaking news, as we finished up the episode, we looked at our phones and saw that the strikes are coming to a close. The WGA, Writers Guild of America, and the AMPTP have come to an agreement. This is breaking news, and it's not when this episode releases, but it's very interesting that it's happening now as we're talking about the strikes, and hopefully this changes some stuff. We talked about it in the Hollywood is Hollywood Dead episode. Just, is this actually going to make things better, or is it going to encourage more lazy writing? And as we look forward to future Marvel productions, we'll see. Back to your regularly scheduled program. Here's the interesting thing about Hollywood, and we forgot to talk about this in Is Hollywood Dead episode, which you should totally go listen to. Not only are we coming off of a hard time for Hollywood from the pandemic, we were just getting that figured out and actually making some good content after the pandemic. And then suddenly the strikes hit, and now we're kind of back into a all hands off deck, a pause on everything, where it's very uncertain, and it's like they can't get things figured out, and it's disappointing. And maybe that's something we can learn, that we need less media in our lives. We didn't really get that hint from COVID. We consumed a lot more media, and obviously without media we wouldn't be having these conversations. But I think we would all do some good to get less invested in stuff like this, so we wouldn't care as much. But yeah, it'll be interesting, both the external drama around this show and the story of it when it comes out. Like, is it just going to be another She-Hulk? I hope not.
Kind of on the flip side of the whole strike thing too, I hope this is the time where the studios look at what they're putting out and they go, do we need to put out all of this? Especially like Marvel, who's doing like so much per year now. It's insane. Like all of Phase 4's like total runtime was longer than the whole Infinity Saga.
Yeah, something like that.
That doesn't have to be the case.
No.
We didn't need half of that.
It's been said too much. It's quantity over quality. And I think it's absurd to assume that Daredevil Born Again will be any exception.
Kind of as I said back in the MCU Dead episode, it's easy to make an audience laugh, but it takes effort to make an audience feel. And that's what the Daredevil show did so well, is that it made you like feel for all these complex characters. And all that Marvel's been outputting recently is just mostly for laughs. I mean, we've still got exceptions, like I would say No Way Home and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But for the most part, it's just all these characters who sound the same making these quips, instead of like all these different, well-written, complex characters that we got in Daredevil that are just so emotional, and we feel with them. Even if they're the villain, we just feel so much for them. And I wish we got more content like that in today's media.
Good thoughts. Thank you for sticking us.
Please don't stick us.
Thank you for sticking with us for a super long episode. If it's super long, it means that we like it. And actually, that's actually a good metric to look at our episodes. If you want a good episode and you have the time, go find anything that's over an hour long. Like, those are the ones that we just talk and have a good time. Subscribe to us wherever you're listening. Follow all our socials, linked in the description. We've got a great community, loves to talk about this stuff, so why not join and have some good conversation. Thank you so much for listening or watching. See you next week. And as always, know that you are loved. God bless.
Peace out.